So yesterday we saw that psychologically the future is now. So there are two states in which one can exist, which may be called being and becoming. In being, there is no ego activity. In becoming, whether it's becoming non-violent or happy or whatever, state of becoming, there is effort and there is that sustains the ego. So Krishnaji's teaching says that it's not the object of your desire, but desire itself which creates the ego, and the ego creates disorder in consciousness and therefore in society. Somebody asked him a question long ago, "Sir, how to cultivate detachment?" And he said, "Don't try to cultivate detachment, sir. You will end up cultivating indifference." For the man who passionately feels for his wife and children, there is hope that his feelings will spread to the rest of humanity. For the man who does not even feel for his wife and children, there is no hope. So it's a bit dangerous, this business of trying to cultivate qualities. And the danger is because it's an ego process, and also because it deceives you. You begin to feel that you are non-violent when what you have done is just a few kind acts or become vegetarian and so on. You have not really ended violence in you. On the whole, vegetarians are not more non-violent than non-vegetarians. Their non-violence extends only to animals, but with their own children and wives and friends, and there is a lot of ego and a lot of violence. So he is talking about virtue as a state of being, as a state of consciousness. And in that, there is no gradual evolution. Either you are egoistic or you are free from that ego movement. Only then there is freedom from the ego. And that requires perception, not a gradual process, because through an ego process, you cannot come to freedom from the ego, basically. We went into it and saw that happiness does not lie in the future. It's an illusion to think that I will be happy in the future. If you are not happy today, you will not be happy tomorrow for the same reasons for which you are not happy today. It depends on how you look across the line at which you are standing. On this side of the line, there are the things to which you have access, which you have your possessions, your relationships, and so on, knowledge. And on the other side of the line are those things which you don't have. And how you look at across the line determines whether you are happy or not. Another way of which is used to explain this is that when a glass is half empty, do you see it as half empty or do you see it as half full? It depends on. Yes? Rao, did you want to say something?
No, sir.
Yeah. So, how you look determines how you feel. Actually, if you have good health, you already have an infinity. But you get used to it, and therefore you're all the time seeking the excitement of getting something more. But And infinity plus delta x will not make you happy. If you are not happy at infinity, you will not be happy at infinity plus delta x for the same reason for which you were not happy with infinity. But the trouble is that one gets used to it and therefore it ceases to be exciting. Whatever you possess ceases to be exciting. I remember a friend of mine who came from a business family. When he started doing business, he used to feel thrilled even if he earned 500 rupees in a day. And then later on, he came to me and he said, you know, I used to feel thrilled even if I earned 500 rupees in a day. But now I earn a whole 1 lakh and it still does not thrill me. It means nothing to me. So the excitement keeps going down and therefore you need more bigger and bigger possessions and so on. So that is the nature of the ego. It will always create more greed, more desires, and more frustration. And that's what destroys the happiness. So in that sense, the future is now psychologically. And the other thing we went into is that time is ego. And the ego creates the disorder and the sorrow. Sorrow as psychological suffering. So freedom from the ego, which is the same as freedom from conditioning, not absence of conditioning, but freedom from attachment to the conditioning, dependence on the conditioning, is the same thing as psychological death, which is, Krishna talks about reincarnate now. That means if you believe in reincarnation, when you die, your memories and all will be destroyed and you will be reborn in next life with a clean slate. So why don't you clean the slate now? That would mean reincarnating now, and that would mean freedom from conditioning or freedom from all psychological memories. Factual memories don't create disorder, but illusions and psychological memories create disorder. So then one has to find out whether it's possible to free the mind of psychological memory. That means you have to free yourself both of flattery and of insult and die to all hurts, because the hurts, if you nurse the hurt, and it distorts you from within. And so all that creates disorder in the consciousness. We went into it yesterday. We said die before the actual physical death, die each day. Don't collect into memory conclusions from that day's experience and then use those conclusions to solve the problems in the next day. Otherwise, you carry a lot of images about people, about things, about concepts, and so on. And that gives you a certain, that memory gives you a feeling of continuity. And that continuity is the me and the ego. So one of the questions that I have, which I think we should all also look into, is that when a man is physically blind, we feel great compassion and sympathy for him, and we help him, and we bring him food, and we help him get across the road or sit in a chair and so on. Why do we hate a man when he is mentally blind? Why does the compassion shrink when he is mentally blind? If he is a terrorist or he is an ignorant man and therefore he is cruel, why do we hate him? And does hating a human being help that human being to overcome what he is doing? Say your brother or your friend has become alcoholic. Now he has a problem. He's not able to give up that addiction. And if I hate him for that, then I add to his problems. He has now two problems, the addiction and the fact that you hate him. So it's not a kind action, and yet that's a very common response, because the ego responds in terms of self-concern. And to have a friend or a brother who is alcoholic is a nuisance for you, and therefore it responds with a feeling of dislike or hatred. So all that ego is time, is disorder, all those go together. So Krishnaji says all these things, pleasure, disorder, time, that whole thing is the ego field, and everything in it is connected to everything else, although we experience it separately. We explain that in terms of the metaphor of a tree whose root is the ego, and the branches are the various disorders that we experience in life. I brought an interesting passage I came across. The Dalai Lama was asked what surprises him most. And he said, man. The Dalai Lama, when asked what surprised him most about humanity, answered, man, because he sacrifices his health in order to make money. Then he sacrifices money to recuperate his health. And then he is so anxious about the future that he does not enjoy the present. The result being that he does not live in the present or the future. He lives as if he is never going to die, and then dies having never really lived. And that is what surprises him most. It's an interesting observation. I thought I would share it with you. And this whole thing is applicable to the way we live and the way we have our concepts of progress and success, and we keep the mind occupied with all that. And in that process, we, as he said, we spoil our health, and then we spend our money to regain our health. Krishnaji was asked another question, and that also relates to what we are talking about. This is 1932 in one of the camps in Ohio. I am an honest man, willing to work and earn an honest wage. Nevertheless, I have been out of work for 6 months and have forgotten what it is like not to be hungry. I am told that you possess nothing, but you are obviously protected by your friends. For your face is still handsome and your body is clothed and well fed. You speak of truth. How can you philosophize while thousands are starving? What is all this talk of truth? To me, truth is food, work, living. You spend your time talking of some hypothetical state of consciousness. Surely the man who tackles the problem of the unemployed, who actively helps his neighbor, is making better use of his knowledge. What is your reply? That's what the question was. And Krishnamurti says, a civilization that has its roots in selfishness cannot be altered in a day. It needs re-educating. A civilization in which the individuals are rampant in their aggressiveness must be fundamentally changed. It must be based on communal work where the individual has no outlet for his selfishness, where individual competitiveness has no reward. But the individual must keep the integrity of his individuality wholly to seek understanding. As it is now, man is selfishly individualistic, competitive in his desire for brutal achievement, seeking his own selfish gains, accumulating possessions, and wielding tyrannical power, all of which create utter chaos. On the other hand, in the search after truth, where he should keep his individuality wholly complete and thereby free from all self-consciousness, he sets up saviors, masters, beliefs, ideals, and authorities, all of which mean blind following. Emphasize individuality in its right place, where the individual realizes completeness in himself. Naturally, we must help one another. We must live together, understand one another, work together. All of this comes about normally and without effort when you have the true understanding of the function of the individual. What I desire to explain is that every individual is complete in himself. In the realization of this completeness, there is true happiness. Such a man then is never the slave of another. He has no beliefs. He is at peace within himself, rich in his understanding, living wholly, naturally, in the eternal present. Thus, he will help to create true order. By bringing about order, there will be work and bread and opportunity for all. But without this true conception of the individual, there will always be chaos in the world. So that is his analysis of the source of the root source of all our problems in life and therefore in society. And he's saying that you are using time not to understand yourself and free yourself from the ego, but to promote the ego. And thinking that eventually that it will bring you to fulfillment. And he denies this role of time. I found a very interesting dialogue which he started with the international committees. You know, all the Krishnamurti foundations have various committees. Apart from the foundations, there are committees in every country, Krishnamurti committees, of people, individuals, small group of individuals who are deeply interested in this inquiry and in the teachings. So he was addressing this group in Europe in 1982. And he makes the following statement, which describes our present state with regard to this inquiry. And I found it very meaningful because each one of us can see oneself in this. He describes every stage in which people who are inquirers are trapped. And it applies to our state. That is why it's important to, I think, give thought to this, what question he is raising. So I'll read that. And then later on, if you want, I will send you this manuscript also. He says, I am an ordinary man. I come across a book of K's and I am struck by one or two statements that are made in the book and would like to know more about it. I see that he is against or at least he is not for so-called spiritual institutions and organizations. And he talks to me about my problems. He indicates what my problems are and the resolution of those problems. And say, I have a problem. I'm not happy in my work. I'm not happy in my relationship with others. I'm rather bored with the whole of life because I have found it has very little meaning, actually. I go to work, I have sex, I have a family or no family, and I drink and all that. If I'm in India, I am tradition bound, and I see he is anti-tradition, if I may use the word. He doesn't give me any guidelines, whether I'm Western, European, or Eastern, and Indian. He doesn't give me any guidelines, and I want guidelines. I'm used to that. And because there are no guidelines, I may put away the book. I say, what nonsense he's talking about. But if I am fairly inquisitive, I say, why doesn't he have guidelines? Why doesn't he tell me what to do? And I begin to inquire and read more. I discover that guidelines only make one more mechanical, more subjectively non-aware. And so I pursue that. And I also see that there have been guidelines before, because I have studied religious affairs somewhat. So I say, now what am I to do? That is my fundamental question. What am I to do? Living an ordinary life, going to the office or factory, or doing some kind of labor? What am I to do? In my reading of the book, does he tell me what I should do? And he doesn't do that either. So, what is he trying to tell me? He's trying to tell me, be aware of yourself, recognize your condition, see what the traps are, and investigate those traps. The religious trap, the economic condition, and so on. What he is trying to tell me is basically to awaken my intelligence, not his intelligence or the intelligence which appears in the book. He's trying to tell me, for goodness sake, awaken your intelligence. Bring it out, question, argue, discuss, doubt. He's telling me all that. Therefore, I begin to find out that I am rather stupid, vulgar, coarse person. But I am not too insensitive. And he's telling me, wake up, it's your life, subtly bring order to it. My whole upbringing has been, tell me what to do. So I am resisting this, and I fall back on that. Tell me what to do. And yet he says, don't ask what to do, but go into it, discuss. So there is in me the resistance and what I have read. There is conflict between what I have read and my resistance. I come to an impasse because I am lazy, because of family life and all those problems, and I rather let it go for a while. It may be a year or 6 months or a day. I let it go for a while. But the seed has been sown in me. The seed that you are responsible for your actions and nobody else. That is what he tells me. And I agree. I see the logic of it. So I accept that. But I I have work. I go to office, factory, I'm a carpenter or a scientist or whatever it may be. And I see more and more the contradiction in my life between what I have read and what I am. So there is a schizophrenic activity going on, a verbal acceptance of the book and of what I have read and my daily life. So I am now concerned with this conflict. I'm suddenly aware that my whole life is based on conflict. Now again I say, please tell me what to do about this terrible conflict which I have. So in me, there is again this contradiction taking place. Tell me, let me accept your ideas. Then I am gradually aware that I am building up authority. I gradually become conscious that I really want authority. Somebody to guide me. And there he says, don't do that. Be a light unto yourself. And I give it up. It is so difficult. So hopelessly, I am lost. I'm lost and perhaps depressed. And I say, well, it's not worth it. Let's wash it out. I haven't got the energy. I haven't got the drive. Perhaps I shall one day get somewhere or the other. That's what generally happens with most of us, as I understand it. I may be wrong. Krishnaji says, I may be wrong in this assessment. There are those who have come to this point and continue. Do not give up. Do not throw in the sponge. And probably that is the case with most of us. He's talking to those committee members who are committed to the teaching. Then I see the importance of the awakening of intelligence and the awakening to the reality that I must be a light to myself. I'm not very clever. I'm fairly efficient in my mundane activity, but this demands quite a different kind of intelligence, quite a different kind of flowering. So where am I now? I have to live in this world. I have to earn money. If I have a family, I have to support it. My wife isn't interested in all this. My children go to school, get more and more vulgar, coarse, insensitive, and I have no relationship with them. So I see the terrible mess I have made for myself and for others. Now, how am I to awaken that intelligence so that I can deal with all that? I have read quite a bit, not only K, but other books. I know a little bit of Indian philosophy, what the Buddhists have said. I am not specially interested in Christianity because there is no philosophy behind it. It's based on belief, faith, and authority. So that doesn't very much appeal to me. So I realized that I am in this mess and I'm asking myself, what am I to do? How am I to awaken that intelligence which with clarity will deal with all these matters of relationship and so on? And he says, be aware. Be aware of the outside world, what is happening there. Look at it without any bias. And I am becoming aware of my activities, my thoughts. No, I find that rather difficult, but I am attempting to be aware of my prejudices, my conditioning, and I am becoming aware of my activities, my thoughts, my feelings, the fields of my insensitivity. I am rather vain, I am ambitious, and so on. So I am discovering in myself the factors, the sources of my insensitivity, and the beginning of this intelligence is slightly creeping in. It's not in full bloom, but it is beginning. And I begin to see actually the things that are not true in my life, the things that are rather false, hypocritical. So I begin to say, is it possible not to be hypocritical, not to pretend, not to put on a mask according to the environment, according to the people I meet? And I see that it is possible. And I begin to discard all this. I'm beginning to realize that intelligence is not the denial of the false, but rather the awareness of the false. I'm beginning to realize that the things I thought were valuable or have some significance have actually no meaning at all. The values I have set for myself, the ideals, actually have no value, have no depth to them. That very perception that they have no depth to them makes those that are false or of no significance fade away. I haven't struggled against them, said they were right or wrong, but the very perception that they have no meaning, that they are not true, that very perception is beginning to wipe away that which is not. So I am becoming, yes, I will use the word becoming. I am becoming more and more aware, more and more alert, more and more watchful. And he also says in that book something rather odd, which I didn't quite understand. He says, don't go through all this process, jump to it. Don't go step by step by step. That's a waste of time. In that step by step, you can go on indefinitely discovering various forms of self-deception and so on. So he says, don't allow time between seeing and action. And to me, that is so extravagantly outside my field. So I'm investigating, what does he mean by that? I begin to see the importance of perception and its relationship to action. That is my position. That is what I would state. That is what an ordinary person, which I am, would say, having come to that point and being stuck there. I go round and round in circles, but I somehow am incapable of breaking that circle. So I ask you who have written that book or given those statements, what am I to do? And he repeats the same thing, don't rely on another. He is perpetually throwing me against myself. So I am rather bored with that. I might say, oh, go to hell. I'm stuck and you don't help me. And he says, nobody can help you. No institutions, no organizations, no external authority or pressures of any kind can help you. Do I listen to him? Or is my anxiety to break the circle so great that I am not even listening to what he is saying? So I am there. I am not listening. And you come along and tell me to listen. When I have a serious problem with myself, wanting an answer, I'm concerned about the problem very deeply. I find myself incapable of listening. The problem is so biting, so deeply disturbing, and you say to me, listen. I can't. I don't know how to listen. But you have told me the action of listening, and that seed has been sown. So I am listening. I am learning. So I am doing the same thing which he has warned me against. Don't allow time. I think that I will learn listening, learn about it gradually, slowly, at my convenience. And he says, that's just a waste of time. So I have come to that point. Now proceed. So you see, that's the difficulty of this inquiry. That's why when we began in the very first talk about how to approach Krishnamurti's teaching, he was saying, enter into this only if you are serious. You are serious means you have a commitment, you really have a passion. You want to understand yourself and you won't easily give that up. You will stay with this question. That means you are serious, not just accepting authority, wanting some guidelines and some help to solve one particular problem, personal problem. But this deep urge to understand yourself. When that is there and you can stay with it, only then you will see the consequences of this inquiry. Otherwise, it will become another piece of knowledge in your head and not really bring you to any transformation of consciousness. And then those are the traps. So this passage shows us that he really understands what we are all going through. And each one of us, he understands where we are stuck. And he's saying, it is your responsibility. Don't depend on the guru. Don't depend on my book. Don't ask for how to do things, what to do. Don't ask for techniques. It requires perception, and nobody can give you perception. Only you can come upon perception, and the perception is action, is real action, because that brings about a real change within you. Change in the sense, you now look at the world differently, you approach your problems differently, you approach life differently, your relationships differently, and you are no longer complaining and demanding all the time some kind of support, some kind of reward, some kind of appreciation, consolation from anybody. Therefore, your entire relationship with your property, with your books, with your work, with your wife and children undergoes a transformation. That needs this deep perception. And that is what is freedom from the tradition in which our mind is trapped. The mind that is not free from conditioning is a traditional mind. Whether it is a Christian traditioning or a Hindu traditioning or a communist tradition or your own particular brand of tradition based on your own experiences and conclusions. It's all tradition. There is nothing, no deep inquiry or understanding coming out of that. It's a mechanical way of living. You have learned to cope with life. You have not really understood life nor your relationships, but you are merely coping with the problems. You cope with your boredom, you cope with your worry, and you cope with sorrow. You have found various ways in which you can take an aspirin and get rid of the pain. The aspirin may be in the form of entertainment or in the form of a football match or some prayer, something. It's just an aspirin. Temporarily, you forget your problems and you are quite content with that. But you are never deeply inquiring what causes these problems constantly in your life. And therefore, you will never be free from it. And that is what he's saying, that you have learned to live like that. You are accepting to live like that and don't live like that. Awaken your own intelligence. Don't ask how to awaken. There is no method. The technique or the method will become another tradition, another mechanical response, another conditioning in the mind. And you cannot come to freedom from conditioning by adding to conditioning. Just see the truth of this. And it is the truth of this that will act. Not all your determination or your desire to practice this awareness and choicelessness and so on. You convert it into another ego process, more subtle perhaps, but still an ego process, always seeking answers, wanting to know what to do, and so on. So he says it's an entirely different way of living. And you can't come to that way of living with your present conditioning. So our life is being driven by that conditioning, and we have got attached to that conditioning, and it is determining everything. It's determining our sorrows, our disorders, our frustrations, our depression, also our pleasures, our joys, and so on. It's determining all that. But it occupies, and that is and he's saying there is a completely different way of approaching life. This is the ego approach, or the approach of accepting conditioning. And he's saying don't accept anything, any tradition. Question it, doubt it, discuss, find out. And you must have the passion to discover without a motive of achieving something out of it. So, today's chapter is on love. And he says love is where the self is not. So ultimately he is questioning what we consider to be love. He's saying what you think is love is not love at all. You say, I love ice cream. You say, I love the way Tendulkar plays cricket or Bradman plays cricket. He loves her so much, he can't live without her for a single day. The love of God, the love of my country, which is nationalism. So, what is love? Is love desire? Is love possessiveness? Is love attraction, admiration? Is love attachment? Is love jealousy? So you don't really know what love is. And everybody keeps saying love is the greatest thing in life. Novels often regard love as just sexuality. He made love to her, they mean that they slept together. So is love sex? Is that the same as the love that Jesus and the Buddha and Krishnamurti are talking about? So we are so completely ignorant about something that is so essential in life. Why? Because nobody in our education has ever asked this question. You go and ask the professor in the university, he is as ignorant as the common man, as the gardener about what is love. Because he's never given any thought to it. He knows what is force, what is acceleration, what is energy. 20 years he has been studying all that and distinguishing one from the other, so he's not confused there. But here he is completely confused. Whether it's love, is desire, or attachment, or sexuality, or possessiveness and craving. What is love? And Krishna says, none of these is love. So you don't know what love is. So how will you discover what love is? First of all, become aware that you don't know what love is. Because real inquiry starts from knowing that you don't know. And therefore you want to find out. If you already know, what is it you're wanting to find out? So you don't really know. It begins with that. Then how will you come upon it? It's a state of being, a state of consciousness, not an achievement to be had, not a throne to be acquired. How do you come upon that kind of consciousness, which is a state of love, where there is no self-concern? You will have to discard everything that is not love. So he says, and that is what in ancient Indian literature, that method is called neti-neti. Means it is not this, it is not this. So it's not jealousy. So find out what is jealousy and eliminate it. It's not attachment. So find out what is attachment and eliminate it. When you have eliminated desire and attraction and ambition and all this which is not love, then you actually will come upon the state which is love. And then you will know what love is. But when somebody gives you a definition of it, and you think you now know what love is, it is just an idea. It's not really love. So the word deceives you. The words make us feel that we have understood when we have really not understood. And that's one of the great dangers of words. And our education, our intellect is full of words and full of images. We don't know what the sacred is, but we have attributed sacredness to that statue in the temple and to certain trees or certain rivers, and they have become sacred and so on. So we really don't know what is sacred. We worship what we consider to be sacred, but we have ourselves decided on what is sacred through our thinking. So you are worshipping yourself, you are worshipping your own thought. See the fallacy of it. You first create a temple and say there is God there, then go and worship that image of God. You have not really found out what God is. So Krishnaji is neither denying God nor asserting God. He's saying, posit the God as unknown and inquire and discover what could be the deepest meaning of that word. Similarly, what could be really sacred? What is really sacred? You have to get rid of all your concepts of what is sacred. Deny those concepts, neti-neti. And then you may discover what is really sacred. We have done that with beauty also. We have created an image of what is beautiful, a beautiful human being, our own concepts about beauty. So we make statues of it, which are beautiful, our images on paintings in the museum and so on. He says, you have lost the feeling of beauty. There is such tremendous beauty in life. Beauty is the joy that you experience in life in simply engaging in that activity. In looking at nature and in relating with nature, you have a sense of joy and beauty you can experience, but you have become insensitive. You have cultivated the intellect and the intellectual abilities and lost sensitivity. Because intellect does not provide sensitivity. Sensitivity comes through contact, through attention, through relationship, deep, intimate relationship with that music, with nature, with your friend, with your child. Then you will experience that beauty in it. But we have defined beauty and we pursue beauty as defined by us. And that becomes a strange way of feeling virtuous without coming upon virtue. So you can define virtue that it's virtuous to go to the temple every day and pray. And you go to the temple and you pray and you sing there and come back. And then you are quite cruel to your wife and children at home and so on. So you haven't really come upon virtue, but you have found an easy way of feeling virtuous. And that is the kind of self-deception which the ego creates. And you have to, therefore, awaken your intelligence. That intelligence is not this intelligence which we consider to be intelligence, which is a clever way of solving equations or cleverness at your job or computerization, things like that. That is a different kind of cleverness, which is ability. He says, there is no intelligence without compassion. So, love is a state of being. It's a state of total order in consciousness. And you can come upon it only with the ending of the self. Because then self-concern is not the dominant factor with which you are constantly being. That's not the drive. You have to discover passion without a motive. Now I noticed, for example, that Krishnaji was talking with the school child with as much passion as he was talking with David Bohm. So he has no this sense that this man is important, he is a great scientist, that boy is nobody, and so on. There is no hierarchy. Wherever he is giving his full attention in the present to whatever he is seeing or whoever he is with. And there is passion in that. That's the state of love. So it's a state in which there is no motive for personal gain. But otherwise, in everything, in friendship, in work, if you're all the time looking for personal gain, for appreciation, for reward, then you are not approaching life with love. So everything can be done egoistically, and the same thing can be done non-egoistically. And that's the beauty of it. That it is not that certain jobs create ego and that certain other jobs are virtuous. No. Virtue is this state in which the ego is absent. That same work can be done with this free mind which is free from the ego. It is not approaching it egoistically, not approaching it like a beggar asking something for itself. So another of his statements is, love has no cause. If you can give an explanation why you love your wife, then you don't love her. I love her because she is so kind. I love her because she is good to my children. I love her because she looks after the house and me so well and so on. What happens when she can't do that? The love disappears. So normally what we call love is a relationship of love is often just a relationship of mutual gratification. You supply me my needs and I supply you your needs. And the day you can't supply my needs, the love disappears. So then that's not love. So if you can give an answer to the question, why do you love your wife? If you can answer that question, you don't love her. If you say, I really don't know why I love her, but I love her nevertheless. So if there is a quality of affection without any kind of demand in it, which is true friendship, no? We accept true friend as someone who comes just out of warmth, out of to want to share life, share one's experience with each other. So one has to watch one's own motive in every activity that you are doing. Your motive at work, your motive in making friends, your motive in relating with your wife and children. Now we think that parents love their children. Very often not love at all, just possessiveness. They are feeling they own their children. There is a beautiful passage in Khalil Gibran's The Prophet, beautiful book, in which he says, your children are not your children. They are an expression of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but they belong not to you. They live in the house of tomorrow. Don't try to give them your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. It's quite a profound statement of the relationship of parents and children. You are their friends. You are there to help them grow. Don't treat them as your possessions and demand something from them, that you must be this way, you must be that way, you must fulfill this desire of mine, and so on. Then it is no longer a relationship of love. So love and true friendship, they go together. And one has to find out if it's possible to relate that way with everything, with nature, with one's own self, your own body, your own mind, to relate with an affection, and not ambitiously, not demanding. It's an energy which is not coming from the ego state. In the Gita also, there is a statement where Krishna asks Arjuna, can you work like an ambitious man, but not be ambitious? So the motive is not ambition, but the energy is there. It's not the energy that is derived from the ego. So you have to watch out. The ego, the highly energetic state can be there from the ego. See how the dacoits, robbers rob the bank. They are extremely alert and they have planned thoroughly in order to rob the bank, and they help each other, cooperate with each other to do that work very passionately. But it's all coming from the ego because the motive is robbery. Can you plan like that? There is a poem, I don't remember, most probably Rudyard Kipling. He says, evil spreads faster than good. These may not be the exact words, but they are the essence of that poem. Evil spreads faster than good, for the evildoer does his work with great passion. The good man does not. Does a principal of a school or a college plan his work and do it with the passion with which the robbers rob the bank? No, he's not willing to awaken the whole night and be aware and not cooperating with all his colleagues and so on to bring about something totally. He's not functioning that way with that kind of energy. So the poet is saying evil spreads because the evil man does work with great passion. And that passion infects others. A lot of our energy comes from friction, from hatred. Great energy, great ability to sacrifice in war. That war energizes you. That enmity energizes you. Now, can you find out whether you can come upon an energy which is not born of hatred, which is not born of enmity, not born of the ego, That is the energy of love. So love is where the self is not. And that is also the state of beauty, because then when you are not seeking anything from it, what you experience is just the joy of the relationship. In that relationship, with the sunset, with the tree, with your wife, with your children, you're not wanting anything for yourself. It's affection for no reason. In that, there is tremendous beauty. So truth, beauty, love, intelligence, which is with compassion, are all just different names. It is one state of being. Wisdom, it's one state of being. Peace, harmony, absence of conflict. It is just one state of being. And the other state is ambition, jealousy, anger, worry, and so on. So you are either in that state or you are in this state. So unless you do neti, it is not this, it is not this, and free yourself of that which is not love, which is not peace, which is not harmony, you don't discover. You will never discover the other state. If you are interested in discovering that state, then you have to take the trouble of understanding all this and freeing yourself of this, because it's our own doing. It's the doing of our own thoughts and thinking. And if we learn that kind of thinking is damaging, it will end. It is continuing because you feel that that kind of thinking is profitable. It's advantageous to you. And that's the illusion. So the ego is an illusion. It's the illusion that acting out of self-interest is in your self-interest. And Krishnaji is saying it is not. That's an illusion. That self-interest is not in your self-interest. It's not profitable. It seems profitable, and that's an illusion. If you stay with this question long enough, you will see the danger of approaching life egoistically, because then you will never discover what love is. You will never know what love is. So, dying to the ego, freedom from conditioning, love, beauty, they are all one and the same thing. It is a state of abandonment of the self, completely out of that kind of motivation, not seeking anything, not approaching life like a beggar. And that's quite a different state of being. So one has to see the falseness of the present approach. You can't sit down and cultivate love. If you cultivate love or humility and so on, that cultivation becomes hypocritical. Krishnaji once said to me, "Sir, all the sorrow in the world is because we have never loved from the bottom of our heart." He's not talking about the love, romantic love that we call love. He's talking about this love. He said, we have never really loved from the bottom of our heart. Everything that we are doing, every person that we are relating with, we have not really loved. Love is a state of being. I mean, it's a kind of light within you. Whoever comes into that light shares in that love. It's not something you acquire. It is something you are. It's a state of being, not one of becoming. So this whole thing of learning and watching is about constantly being aware of one's motive. Right now, in this activity which we are doing, where I am talking about all this and you are listening, it can be egoistic. If the motive in me is to impress you, to get something from you, win your admiration, and so on. Or it may be non-egoistic if one is just sharing this out of interest, because one is interested in this inquiry and one wants to share it with a friend. In sharing, there is no ego. But in demanding something, in doing it in order to achieve some result for oneself, that self-concern is the root of all sorrow, and that is the ego. That's the root of the tree. So I'll end it here. Please, and we can have some discussion. I think not too much time is left, about 10 minutes. And then...
Yeah, any questions for Professor? You can go ahead, and I don't see anybody lined up. Yeah, Rohan has a question.
Yes, Rohan.
Yes, thank you, sir. So my question is regarding responsibility. In chapter of love, Krishnamurti talks about it's not duty or the responsibility of a person that is in state of love. Yet we talk about commitment to inquiry and questioning. So in what sense we can understand one's own responsibility?
You know, there is also duty which comes from your background, from your culture. It's your duty as a son to look after your parents, or to respect them and love them. This is taught. And similarly, for your wife and children, there is a sense of duty that is there. That duty is not love. It's a responsibility that you have taken on yourself. I mean, you have married, you have produced children, and you have, not necessarily legally, but you have committed yourself to creating a family and looking after those children and bringing them up. It's like you have taken a job at work and you have certain responsibilities. You have to be there from 9 to 5, and you are supposed to do some research or whatever you have agreed to do. So that's the contract, and they pay you a certain salary for it and so on. That's the contract. Now, you can do this egoistically. You can also do this with love. So in your relationship, is there love, or is it mutual gratification, which is demanding something from yourself? In your relationship with your wife, the responsibility is there because you have, responsibility is like a promise. You have made a promise that I will do this, this, and this. That's the agreement. Huh? The postman brings the post. I need him to bring the post. I depend on him for my post. And my wife cooks my food and so on, and I depend on her for my eating food or so many other things. That is just sharing responsibilities within the family. Different people perform different tasks, like different professors in a university department will teach different subjects, different aspects of the subject, and do research. Each one has taken up, he has promised to do a certain work, and it's your responsibility to do that. But are you doing it with love, or are you doing it with the motive of competition and rivalry and success and all those ego things in your relationship with your work? So love is a perfume in that. It's not based on the structure. And you cannot measure love that I love somebody more when I have more relationship with that person. Often people say that I love, and because you confuse the extent of relationship, you call it as extent of love. You measure love in terms of the extent of relationship. No, the extent of relationship is how much sharing is taking place. But love is the spirit in which you are relating within that responsibility. So there can be a marriage in which you are keeping all the contract, but you don't really have love. And there can be a living together in which there is no, you're not even married, but you have love. And you care and you have this feeling. So love is not, normally we think marriage is the duty of the wife to provide sex. So I can demand sex. And there is such a thing as marital rape, which is quite common. And the man comes home and says, I must have sex because you're my wife. It's your duty to do that. And that in that there is not love. So when you care, when you have affection, you don't behave that way, irrespective of whether it's within marriage or outside marriage. Marriage is just a contract which has been socially approved and stamped.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sir, can we take one more question before a break?
Yes, please.
Alina, would you like to go next, please?
Professor Krishna, hello.
Hi, Alina. So nice to see you.
Yes, me too. Well, Krishnamurti points to one point: to free ourselves, to discover love, and is to observe the root of the tree. But to observe the root of the tree, in these chapters, he mentioned to cultivate perception. And can you tell us a little bit more? You know, you have been talking about it, but you know, to cultivate perception is the first time that I've heard Krishnamurti saying that as cultivate.
Yeah. Not cultivate through the application of your will to cultivate it. Otherwise, you know, we said that through an ego process, you can't come upon freedom from the ego. And without freedom from the ego, there is no sensitivity. Sensitivity is this feeling of joy and beauty and love. All that is sensitivity, compassion. It's a feeling without any motive behind it. So the two don't go together. Ego doesn't go along with it. So the perception means when you perceive the danger of the ego, that is, you perceive that this itself is creating all my problems. This kind of approach, the approach will cease. Because nature has put in us a intelligence which is not the intelligence of our thought, but it's the intelligence of nature which protects us. We don't court danger, but you have not perceived the danger of the ego. And therefore, you remain egoistic and you only have the opinion that I should not be egoistic. And so that becomes that it is an ideal which you are trying to practice, but you are not in that ideal. And therefore, you have this sense of cultivating. Then that cultivation itself becomes a desire and ambition process. So it's a very vicious circle. That approach itself is false. Now, to see the falseness of this is perception. It's only when you see the falseness of it, not your opinion, that it is false. Opinions are very superficial things. They are just ideas in the head. You can have an opinion that one should be non-violent. You won't become non-violent just because you have that opinion. You can't decide to do any of these things. It must come from within. And we ourselves are preventing that. So nobody else is flowering. The order in my consciousness is not there because I am creating all the disorder. Stop creating the disorder. That is the perception. Then you will have order, and love will flower in your consciousness. And sensitivity will be there, because then there will be attention. Then you will be mindful in the present. You will relate with everything that way, and not only with those you consider important and those whom you consider more profitable. You will not be pursuing profit. You will be coming out of a love or affection, what we have just talked about. And so they are all related. Without sensitivity, there will be no love, and without love, there is no sensitivity. They go together. Keats, the English poet Keats, he made a very beautiful poem. He said, truth is beauty, and beauty truth. That's all that you need to know. That's all that is there to know, and all that you need to know. The rest of it is not necessary. So you have to come upon this, that truth is beauty. And beauty is that joy which you experience, for no reason. No, not the pleasure of deriving satisfaction, of getting more possession and so on. No, the joy of just sharing something, that's beauty. So truth is beauty, beauty truth. That's all there is to know, and all that you need to know. That's what Keats says. I don't know whether he was free or not, but he made a beautiful poem, all right. He must have come to some depth to sense that. So Krishnamurti is also saying that truth, beauty, sensitivity, compassion, love, they are all intelligence in the sense of wisdom. All that is one thing, one state of being. And the other is this ego and competition and rivalry and achievement and possessiveness and jealousy. So you have to get out of this field. But we think we want to remain in this field and add the other thing into this field, bring the other thing into this field. The two are exclusive. You can't. So long as you are functioning in the ego field, you are not in the other field. So you have to step out of this field, get out of this field.
Thank you, Professor.
You're welcome.
Should we now break, sir?
Yes, for half an hour, and we meet at 6:50.
Thank you. Sir, can we get started?
Yes. Sure.
So just at the last minute, there were two questions.
Yeah, we can take them up first and then go on.
Okay.
There will be plenty of time because in this last chapter, very much, a lot of it we have already covered about the learning. So we will have a lot of time now. So you can take up questions in the beginning or also afterwards.
Okay, sir. So one of the Peter asked about further elaboration on compassion, and along the same lines, Mario asked a question. So let me go ahead and read the question.
Sure.
Someone mentioned compassion. It is possible to feel compassion for self and others when the mind is not really quiet.
See, since in this area, our decision and will don't work and only complicate matters more. You can't think in terms of is this possible or not possible. Whatever is taking place, you are studying it, you are asking questions about it, and you are observing it with great attention and passion which has no motive in it. There is no motive to come to a conclusion and add to knowledge. That is, in the field of knowledge, there is this additive process of acquiring more new ideas and adding them to the existing ideas which you already have. This is really an unlearning process. You are unlearning those habits which block you. You are unlearning those things which block the flowering and of love and compassion in consciousness. So it's really an unlearning process, and therefore you cannot attain it through will. You can only observe and question and study it, understand in order to, with a motive to understand. The motive to understand is not egoistic, but the motive to become or to achieve a result, including wanting to change something, is egoistic. Even if you want to change to something noble, it is still egoistic. And you are wanting to make it happen. So the will comes in. And the will is the essence of the ego. So this very approach has to be given up. That itself is part of the conditioning with which we grow up. And you have to get out of that conditioning. So you can't do it through will. You cannot end the ego process through an ego process. So you can only watch. Watch choicelessly without judging, saying this is right, this is wrong, it should be there, it should not be there, I want this, I don't want this. No. You are just learning it like a phenomenon about which you want to understand what all goes on there. So you are not excluding anything, you are not choosing, you are not judging, you are not suppressing, you are not interfering. And that's what it means that you are observing without the observer. The observer being you, who likes and dislikes, who judges, evaluates, condemns, extols, praises, feels satisfaction, dissatisfaction. All that is not there if we are only paying attention and observing. So Krishnaji's recommendation is, if you can watch with full attention, with all your senses and without a motive to gain something. Normally we have this motive to achieve a result. So you can decide not to, but you can watch that when you approach it that way, all the desire process and all the consequences of the ego start entering into your process of observation and study. So when you are only wanting to learn about it, you are not discarding anything. You are not saying, this is important, that is not important. I'll pay attention to this, I'll not pay attention to that. No. You are just not using your judgment and entering into it at all. That is what it means, this choiceless awareness. See, awareness is not a thought faculty. Awareness is this capacity to see something. To be aware of a tree, you just see the whole tree. The leaves, the color, everything. But when you have to describe it in thought, you will describe it bit by bit. That's the nature of thought. It has to analyze. It has to talk about the roots, then the trunk, then the branches, then the leaves, then the height, the weight, the light on the tree, and so on. Awareness takes the whole tree in. It is aware of the whole thing. So it has a holistic character. And choice again comes in through thinking. I like this, I don't like that, and so on. And all that brings in your conditioning. Your thinking brings in your conditioning. So you can't come to freedom from conditioning by using conditioning. You can only watch the interference of your conditioning in this process and see what it does. And as you discover that this conditioning itself is responsible for all the disorder and the ego and so on, that very realization, that perception changes things. So that is what he's saying. When you pay deeply, you pay attention. Not thought, attention, awareness. Awareness with a intensity, sensitivity. Then what is undergoes change. But the moment you bring in the observer who says, I want to change in this direction or in that direction, then the ego comes in. And all the ego process and all its disorders enter into the picture. So it complicates things. That's why this learning is very different from the normal learning which we are used to, which is learning techniques, acquiring more knowledge, and so on. There, knowledge has a role, accumulation has a role. It is cultivation of memory. The memory keeps those techniques and so on and so on. And then you are asking questions beyond the known and doing research to add to the known. Here, you are not doing that. Here, you are not wanting to add to your conditioning. Another layer of conditioning called the Krishnamurti conditioning. No. You are trying to see the danger of conditioning. And that very process of perceiving the danger brings about change. And that's a natural change. It is not a change effected by the observer, by his will. So it's not discipline in the sense of forcing with will, and yet there is a discipline. Discipline, the word discipline is used with two meanings. You know, you say physics is a discipline, art is a discipline. And there is also, you are disciplining the soldiers and you are disciplining the students to behave in a particular way. And that there is violence, there is punishment and reward and all that, controlling. So there is no controlling here. Not that kind of discipline. But there is a discipline which comes because you are learning. The learning itself has its own discipline. So it has, the discipline also comes natural, not through your will. So that's why it is something entirely different. The learning that as self-knowledge is completely different from the learning that we are used to.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
There are no other questions at this time, sir.
I thought you said there were two.
Yeah, the first one was asking to talk about compassion.
Yes, I have not talked about that.
Yeah.
Now, compassion is different from pity. Pity is a thought process. You are thinking, you are comparing, and you are saying, oh, he is so poor and he is having so much suffering. I, poor fellow, like that. So it is born of a thought process. Compassion is like love. You feel one with the other person. So you feel his pain. Although you are not having that pain in your body, but you feel that pain. And you feel the joy. When you see his joy, you feel the joy. I'm reminded of a instance when in the school, the children staged a play or dance or something, and then they came to Krishnaji and said, did you enjoy it? And he said, because he wanted to be honest about it, it was not really very enjoyable in the normal sense of the word. He said, I enjoyed the fact that you were enjoying. That is compassion. That you see the child enjoying and therefore you enjoy, not because you enjoy. It's not the me that is enjoying. It is one with what it is observing. The other person's joy infects you, and the other person's sorrow also infects you. There is sorrow of compassion too. When you see the other man suffering, you suffer with him. And when you see him dying, you hold his hand and you die with him. In the sense that you go through the same experience he is experiencing, or similar experience, maybe not the same to that same extent. That is compassion. So it involves this unity which is love, where I am not separate from you. Because that's the ego, the attachment to me and mine separates me as an individual. When you are free from that, then you are just one with the other person. Whatever you are looking at, there is no observer looking at it, no you looking at it. So that is what is observation without the observer. Right? What I'm describing is, of course, in words and intellectual, but that state, it is referring to a state, and you have to experience that state, which is the truth about it. Until then, it is only a concept or an idea. And a concept or an idea should be taken as a question, not as an answer. That's why it's an inquiry. In that sense, it is an inquiry.
So Ashwin has a question for you, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Hello, Professor. Hi.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So I just had a question. Previously, you mentioned that the energy that comes from hatred is more vigorous than the energy that comes from love. So it looks like that's like I do see that that is very much true, and he and the even the energy that comes from love is very easily, it can be bent if there is even one small altercation between the folks involved or whatever. So why are we inclined towards the passion towards hating than loving?
No, that is just an observed fact that desire motivates us, ambition motivates us, competition motivates us, reward motivates us. Nobel Prize motivates so many scientists and so on. That's why they offer these prizes and so on. They are taking for granted that we are egoistic people, and therefore they are promoting the ego by offering rewards and saying that people get energized and they work when there is a reward. And that's the ego process. And the whole world is all the time using this to create energy in the individual. So we are quite familiar with the energy of the ego. The question that is being raised is there an energy which is not born of the ego? Not born out of some reward or some advantage I am going to get out of it. Now there are these two inquiries, inquiry is innately there in the human consciousness. It's probably the first consciousness in the course of evolution, because animals are not capable of this kind of inquiry. So the human being has this capacity for inquiry or propensity for inquiry. Every human being has it. We only direct that capacity into either science or mathematics or gadgets or learning about sociology or whatever. You direct your inquiry into this or that, or businessman directs it into how to make profit. But all the time you have questions, you have imagination, you have planning, you have all that. So all that the human inquiry is innately there, just as thinking capacity is there, language is there in the human consciousness. Inquiry is there. Now there are two major inquiries. One is the inquiry into how does the whole universe function? The external world around us, how does it function? And the other is, how does the inner world of our consciousness function? Now, human beings have not inquired into this because they wanted some profit. Science became profitable only after the Industrial Revolution and so on. But there was a lot of science being done just because they had inquisitiveness was to learn about the eclipse, why does the sun shine and why is the sky blue, why are there different species and how does a seed become a tree. These questions, people were investigating them just in order to learn about it. They were not getting any profit out of it. There was no motivation. There were no rewards in those days being offered for that. So it was an act of love. The inquiry itself was not motivated. It was a natural inquiry coming out of inquisitiveness, which is innately there in human nature. The other inquiry is this religious inquiry, which also is very antiquated. I mean, it's thousands of years old. right in the Upanishads and so on, it's all mentioned. This inquiry into death, into what happens after death, into whether there is reincarnation, is the soul separate from the body, and what is the purpose of our life, why is there disorder or negative emotions in us, can we be non-violent? All these kind of questions, the inquiry into this, was also being done without any motive, just to understand. So you can do it with a motive. You can do science in order to make a bomb, then there is a motive behind it. Or to create electricity, then there is a motive behind it, which is technology. So technology has come about through using science, the truths of science, in order to achieve an end. Both the war, end may be war, or end may be prosperity. So, but science was being done just for the love of it. And similarly, this religious inquiry, there was nothing. You were not trying to achieve some status, some position, something, and therefore doing this inquiry. It was part of the inquisitiveness of human nature. So that's why, in my view, both the scientific inquiry and the religious inquiry, they started with this common ground of inquisitiveness, which is innately there in the human consciousness. And for a long time, a learned man was engaging in both. So in the time of Pythagoras, Leonardo da Vinci, and Archimedes, and all these people, ancient scientists and philosophers, they didn't separate out science and engineering and art and so on. A learned man was learning whatever he was interested in, and he was doing it just for the love of it. This whole idea of you doing it for utilization is a later development. This whole idea of progress as GDP, GNP, and so on. Earlier, that's why when you do science also, they give you PhD. PhD is Doctor of Philosophy. Science was part of philosophy, not separate from philosophy in ancient times. Philosophy was a quest for truth, and so was science a quest for truth in a different area, and so was religion, a quest for truth within about our consciousness. Later on, it turned into worship and God and virtue, and the established religions came later on. The inquiry, they were byproducts of the inquiry, just as engineering and technology was the byproduct of the scientific inquiry. But both the scientific inquiry and the religious inquiry were without a motivation, just in order to understand nature and to understand consciousness. So they were not necessarily ego activities. They are an innate part of our nature within. I don't know if I have answered your question, but it triggered all this in my brain, what I have said.
I think I got the idea that you're leading to.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Sir, Sumita has a question for you, sir.
Yeah. Welcome, Sumita. Hello, Mitu.
Can you hear me?
Yes, that's not the Sumita, it's a different Sumita.
No, it's not Sumita at all. It's Chandra.
Yeah, that's my husband's computer. That's
Okay. Good. Mrs. Chandra. Okay.
So I was reading a passage in which one of the listeners asks Krishnaji, do you believe in reincarnation?
Yes.
He says, if you really want me to answer that question, I do not believe in anything.
Yes.
And so when we talk of reincarnation, it looks like he negates reincarnation as a form of belief. So when sometimes the dialogue settles on the eternal as a timeless state, is that reincarnation, or what does it mean to reincarnate in our present lives?
Yeah, as I have understood from my readings of his dialogues and so on, he said reincarnation happens to be a fact for me because I remember certain things. That means he remembered things from his past life and so on. He could see that. And therefore, for him, it was a fact. But he said, I don't want you to believe in it. So basically, he's saying belief has no great significance. It is just when do you believe? Why do you believe something? When you don't know something, you say, I don't know. That's the truth. But when you believe something, you are doing it because you are deriving some comfort out of that belief. So it is a sort of egoistic activity, including believing in God and so on. It gives you some feeling of peace or security, therefore you believe in it. So it's not the truth, but he didn't deny God. He said, find out. God is the unknown. Find out what it deeply means. So the whole of nature, the whole universe is a manifestation of God. And so there is that way of looking at God as the intelligence of nature, or the which is functioning in the universe. And all the laws that scientists study are expressions of how that intelligence works. They are studying how that intelligence works, and they find that it is orderly and it has certain laws which they determine. That's explaining how the intelligence operates, but does not mean that there is not intelligence. The other belief that it's all mechanical and there is no intelligence, that can be questioned. Does even plants have intelligence? I mean, if you have noticed the bougainvillea growing, if there is a wire nearby, it has no eyes and so on, but it's able to sense in some way, and it grows in that direction to catch hold of that wire. No, that is a form of intelligence that is there, and sensitivity. It may be not in the same form as in us, in evolution that has grown. There is intelligence, greater intelligence in the animal and still greater in the human mind, capacity and so on. It has grown in the course of evolution. But there is intelligence in all life. Even the amoeba, it has a way of, if you put some poison in at one corner, it shrinks and goes off to the other direction. Now, whether that's purely mechanical or it is nature's intelligence, it's a question about it. Even the scientists are arguing about that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No more questions for now, sir. We can keep it.
Okay. So this last chapter means last for today, the 11th chapter, is talking about this learning, which is freedom from the self and freedom from conditioning, which is very different from the other learning, which we all go through in school and college and university, which is accumulation of skills and accumulation of knowledge, which is all building up, in a way, building up memory in the brain. That memory in the brain acquires a capacity, and that capacity, when it is used cleverly, we call as intelligence. That's the process of knowledge, in that you can use the knowledge which has been previously acquired, and you can go to the limits of that knowledge and then have research at the level, at the boundary between the known and the unknown, and acquire more knowledge and add to the existing knowledge. So it's an additive process, accumulative learning. Similarly, you don't have language, you don't have musical ability, but you practice and you learn from an expert and so on. So it's a valid process. You eventually find that you are able to sing better than you could do before. So certain ability develops in your brain and body. Self-knowledge is an entirely different kind of thing. It is not knowledge at all. It is this whole question of understanding how your consciousness operates and why there is disorder in consciousness in the form of all these negative emotions. And then discovering the causation and where the causation is coming from an illusion, which may be a belief which is put together by thought, which you have accepted as true, but it's not true in the sense it's not created by nature, it's just created by you and your thought. So if you don't create it, you can break it. So the illusion can be ended because it's created by your own thinking. And so if you don't think that way, the illusion dissolves. So what is illusory and what is factual? What is truth and what is illusion? It's mostly the disorders are all arising from illusion. That was the teaching of the Buddha. That's also the teaching of Krishnamurti, that therefore this quest for truth, to discern what is true and what is false in your conditioning, within your consciousness, it is that. So you are really interested in unlearning the false. You can't unlearn the true because the true exists. But you can unlearn the false because the false is just put together. It doesn't actually have existence in nature. So that is a different kind of learning. And you don't know what is true and what is false. So you have to start from what is taking place, observe it, and look for causation and question it and doubt it. So you approach it with a learning mind, which says, I don't know, I think so, I feel so, but I don't know if this is healthy, if this is true. I'm going to find out. And that's this inquiry of self-knowledge. And if it turns egoistic, just as if science turns egoistic, then it is done in order to make a bomb or in order to achieve a result. In the same way, the religious inquiry can also turn into an egoistic inquiry if it wants to become a guru or acquire fame and name and so on. So the dangers are all there of the ego process entering into this inquiry itself. But that ego process itself is also an illusion, because it comes in because we think that that process is advantageous and profitable. But when you examine it, you will find that it is the source of all the disorder in our life and our consciousness. So learning about all this requires careful watching and attention with this kind of learning mind, which has questions and doubts, and it's a kind of research into what your own beliefs and your own ideas are. without accepting them. So you don't accept even your own ideas, not to talk about the ideas of Krishnamurti or any other philosopher and so on. You investigate all questions. So it doesn't matter the source of the question. Is pleasure the same thing as happiness? That's just a question. It doesn't matter from which source it came to you. But you can examine that question. And in examining and investigating it in your daily life, you come to a deeper understanding of what is pleasure and what is happiness. And you see the distinction between the two and the joy. And similarly, we talked a little while ago about love. So we asked all these questions. Is love desire? Is love attachment? Is love jealousy? Is love possessiveness? Is that the same love that the Buddha and the Jesus Christ talk about and so on? So when you investigate that, you begin to discern what is true and what is false. And you come upon self-knowledge, which is a key to wisdom. So this is not growing in knowledge, but how does a human being grow in wisdom, in his understanding of himself? This is a different process from the knowledge process. Knowledge is like intellectual property in your mind. This is unlearning the false. It is a totally different kind of thing. And therefore freeing oneself of the disorder in consciousness. That's how I understand it. So this learning has to be done differently. And all the dangers which are there of the ego coming into this inquiry are there in this inquiry just as much as in scientific inquiry. And so you have to be very, very watchful of your motives also, not only of what you are doing and what you are learning, but also the motive with which you are doing it. That's why Krishnaji talks about looking at ourselves without judgment, without condemnation, without saying this is right, that is wrong, all of which comes from our conditioning. So don't bring in your conditioning. You are observing and inquiring, and you learn from observation. In that sense, I see a parallel between modern science, which after the time of Galileo started with experimentation, and then it increased by leaps and bounds. The understanding of the universe has increased by leaps and bounds in the last 500 years. But so long as people were just using thought and so on, they got stuck in various beliefs and ideas and notions, and there was not that kind of progress, right from the time of Aristotle till the time of Galileo, which is nearly 2000 years. The scientific inquiry was also stuck in authorities and intellectual inquiry only and so on. It's only when observation came in as an important way of learning. And the same thing Krishnaji is saying about this other learning, which is really an unlearning the false within oneself. So it's a very dicey thing, because the ego is there, the egoistic thing is there, but you have this capacity to be aware of it and to watch what's going on. And if you have a learning mind, you can learn about it, and you can unlearn that which is false. Take a crude example, casteism is false, but it is infecting the mind in India for thousands of years. And it has led to discrimination and so much of division and unhappiness and so on, discrimination, domination, all that. The whole thing is false. There is no difference between the Shudra child and the Brahmin child. It's only in your head. If you accept that, so that's the illusion. The man in illusion is not aware that it's an illusion. He takes that to be true. But it is not true. So how will you know whether what you are thinking is true? And unless you know that, you have no basis for thought. You may be propagating falsehood. You may be propagating an illusion. And you think you are doing a marvelous job. So you are caught in an illusion. That's why this question is not popular, because it leads to disillusionment, and we love our illusions. We are attached to our illusions. We are not willing to give them up. We derive a certain satisfaction in them. We have invested in them. So people invest in their caste, in their religious belief, and so on. Same way with attachment. So this learning is difficult because disillusionment is painful. So it's easy to say I'm in quest for truth, but if you are looking for truth only so long as it is comfortable, then you are not really looking at truth, because truth may be very painful, very disturbing to the mind. Are you willing to be disturbed? So not many people are willing to be disturbed, and this inquiry creates disturbance. It points out that you are on some kind of a ego trip without knowing that you are on an ego trip. Is there any other question, or shall we continue?
Continue.
Okay. So Krishna is saying that you have to observe your conditioning and the way your consciousness functions without bringing in the observer as the conditioning, and who is judging, evaluating, condemning, saying this is good, that is bad. So that's why he calls it choiceless awareness. Don't bring in choice, don't bring in your thinking. Just use this faculty of awareness, which is a capacity to observe what is going on. The thought is being used only to create a question. And then the question is not being answered through thinking, but it's being answered through awareness of watching the whole process which is going on inside. And this inquiry needs to be done with a passion without motive, which is what we called as love in the previous hour. Because if you bring in the ego, then you cannot come upon freedom from the ego. So it's a vicious circle. If this inquiry itself is egoistic, it cannot bring you to freedom from the ego. And if there is no freedom from the ego, then all the disorder which comes from the ego will be retained and maintained. So it is subtle. It's not, therefore you can't create rules about it. You can't say, do this, don't do this, this is good, this is bad. That's too elementary. It's very subtle, it's nebulous. It's like an art. An art cannot be learned through a book. An art, you have to sit down and work at it and it will come. It's like a balance. It's like putting everything in its right place. So it's not that thought is bad, thought should not be used, nor is it that thought is everything and it can take you everywhere. Find out what is the right use of thought, what is the right use of imagination, and what's the wrong use of imagination. Right and wrong, not in some moral sense, but right and wrong in the sense that which leads to disorder and that which does not lead to disorder in consciousness. Disorder being the negative emotions, division, hatred, jealousy, frustration, all those negative emotions. And order being love, compassion, silence, non-violence, peace, all that is order. So order is destroyed. Order has no cause, but order is destroyed by the disorder. And the disorder is created by egoistic thinking. So it can be ended by watching and then learning not to use thought that way, which is not discarding thought, because you need thought to perform operations, you need thought to use the computer and so on. To go home, you need thought. So you have to find out which kind of thought is destructive, creates division, and which kind of thought does not do that. Using thought where thought has destructive role goes wrong. Not using thought where thought should be used also goes wrong. So to find out the right place of thought, you will have to observe. You will have to learn through observation, because you can't just decide that I should not have this or I should have this. So there is no right and wrong about it. It is, when it's out of place, it will create disorder. And so every time you experience disorder in consciousness, which is very perceptible because there is pain in that disorder, then it's an opportunity for you to learn. When I experience either jealousy or anger or greed or violence or hatred within my consciousness, it's informing me, Krishna, there is still some illusion somewhere in your mind from where this arises. Find out what that is and end it. And that's the learning, which is self-knowledge. That's the inquiry that one has to do. And you can end it because it's an illusion. An illusion ends when you discover what is true and what is false. Then the false ends. It has no existence. It is something that is imaginary. And you have accepted that. And when you see that it is imaginary, it just ends. False drops away. You don't need effort. You don't need will to suppress it. Suppression with will does not eliminate the problem. It just suppresses its expression for a while. So that's not learning. But we have learned to cope with all these problems and to escape from them. We escape from boredom through entertainment. We escape from sorrow by finding consolation or by going to the temple and belief and so on. So then the cause is not eliminated. But if you inquire into it, what causes sorrow? What is boredom? How does it arise within me? Then you will discover for yourself that boredom is caused by insensitivity. That I don't really enjoy anything. I only enjoy the excitement of getting more. And that's an ego process of getting more. Therefore, I become insensitive to what I already have. And that means I don't experience the joy in things which I have access to. And that's why all the time getting something new has become important. And because the mind is constantly looking for something more, something new, therefore it does not pay attention to what it already has. And so it loses sensitivity, it loses relationship with what you already have. And that is boredom. Insensitivity is boredom. Now, insensitivity also has a cause. So you have to find out what the causes are of insensitivity. You will find that ambition is a cause for insensitivity. So if you want to come upon sensitivity, you have to approach the thing without ambition. Desire creates and all kinds of ideals and so on make for cruelty and so on, judging other people and so on. So is a lot of false habits into which one has fallen, and one doesn't know that they are false. One has to discover that. And when you discover that, it ends. And then that is real change, not through escape. We have got used to it. We accept worry, we accept boredom, we accept quarrels, we accept war, we accept anger and jealousy, because it's quite common in all relationships and so on. We just treat it as bad luck if it's happening with us and so on. And Krishna is saying, no, it's not bad luck. You are the cause of it, and you can learn about it and free yourself. Now, it's a vicious circle, because if you have become insensitive, this inquiry becomes very difficult, because you don't notice everything. You don't notice because you are insensitive. When you are insensitive, you don't notice the flower, the river, the mountain. You just go past because your mind is all the time in your office and so on. So he wanted to change education, because once you have become insensitive, it becomes very difficult to come back to sensitivity. So right from childhood, can we make sensitivity an aim in education and not use any methods which create insensitivity in the child? So you have to create activities which promote sensitivity, make him grow a plant, take care of a pet, give him art and music and things, take him out into nature, let him see birds and animals and so on. So when that is your aim in education, you will make it that kind of campus. You will have that kind of classrooms and so on. When it's not the aim, only intellectual training is the aim, you make the institutions the way they are right now, which we have all come through. So we lose sensitivity. Sensitivity is also how you see adults behaving around you. If they are quarreling, if they are doing politics, if they are shouting at each other, that's what the child picks up as the norm. And if they are gentle and they are discussing and they are having dialogue and not fighting with each other, then he learns that that is the way, that's the right way to approach life. So that's a very different kind of education. You are taking responsibility for the entire human development of the body, of the mind, of the emotion, of the spirit. So it's a holistic kind of education, not just training to get a job. That's a wrong concept of education. So Krishnaji is pointing out that what we think is love is not love. What we consider is religion is not real religion. What we consider is education is not real education. What we consider is humility is not really humility. What we consider, what we have been taught is respect is not really respect. So we are living in a world of illusion. Not the true world, the real world. We are living in a world of illusion. What you call love is desire. And you called it love, but it's not love. So you don't really know what love is, but you mistake it for love. That's illusion. So that is what it means, that illusion is the cause of our sorrow, because all these things, unless you investigate and come upon the deeper, truer meaning of all these words, you are not living in actual contact. You don't really have respect. Krishna said once in his talks, "Sir, you are so respectful. You are also respectful to me. But I wonder if you really know what respect is. Because you don't respect your wife. you don't respect your children. You don't respect the servant. You don't respect the dog around the corner. You don't respect the tree. So you don't know what respect is. Respect is a state of consciousness, of being, where you care for the feelings of all others. And that you don't have. You respect your teachers, you respect your parents, you respect the powerful man, you respect the God in the temple. That's not real respect. That's just you have been told to respect, and that's your conditioning. And you don't really know what respect is, just as you really don't know what love is. But you think you know what love is, and that is illusion. We are not aware of all this as illusion because we take that as the norm. And he's saying that whole thing, you have to get out of that ego field, the field of illusions. You have to get out of it. The ego itself is an illusion. And you can, of course, we read that passage, no? What is he trying to tell me? People give up at different stages of this inquiry because they say it's impossible, just too much, I can't do this, and so on. So if you're seeking comfort, you're seeking pleasure, you're seeking satisfaction, you're seeking achievement, you will give up because it'll be very frustrating. But if you want to come upon the truth and really find something what is beyond the known, then you have to go through all that. You have to be willing to face disappointments, learn from them, and that is what commitment is to the inquiry. And only then you are serious about that inquiry. It's not something you can do casually and add to your existing knowledge as another layer of conditioning, so-called Krishnamurti conditioning. I know what he says. Your knowing what he says has absolutely no significance. It's as useless as knowing anything else. It's this inquiry, when taken seriously, when connected to daily life, it can really transform things within you. And that transformation then is wisdom. And that the change, the real change, is a byproduct of this understanding, which is wisdom. You can't come upon it through will, through idea, through method. None of that works. Through organization, through prayer, you can't come upon it. At least that's his teaching. You don't have to accept it. Try it. Try all those methods and so on and see whether it brings you really. But be honest about it. Do it with a learning mind, not with a believing mind. Because with belief, you can believe anything. You can believe that you are God without being God. So all the dangers and deceptions are there. And all these problems are interconnected to each other. So just solving one problem at a time and so on is not enough. I mean, you may have to begin like that, but eventually you will see that they are all interconnected and that the root of it is this feeling of being a separate me, which comes from identification with a fragment, with your own people, and the other people are not included in that, and so on. We have gone into that, how division arises. And so you have to learn not to identify. Are you willing? Are you willing to give up your religion? Are you willing to, because that's not true. What your religion is telling you is your particular brand of illusion. But it gives you certain superficial satisfaction and makes you belong to a certain community and so on. If you see the connection between that and war, then you are contributing to war. Your nationalism, identifying with your religion, with your particular caste or family. And so on. So that whole thing is overturned by this teaching. It says just approach everything like a true friend, not asking anything for yourself in return. And just approach it with love, come upon love. And then it will be a different life from what you are leading now. But you want small changes here and there, and you want the ego to continue with having more noble desires and so on, then good luck, you try it. It doesn't work, is what he's saying. All that has already been tried, the simple things have all been tried. And nothing has worked. Science has not worked, religions have not worked, culture has not worked, communism has not worked, government has not worked, the Theosophical Society has not worked. Nothing has been able to change man. Because change is a byproduct of wisdom, and without wisdom, you can't come upon it. You can alter your behavior to some extent. We all do. But that's only control. That's not real change. So one has to find out whether one is really interested in inner transformation or one is only interested in outer transformation and control. If you look at the problem of crime, for example, we haven't been able to solve it, no? We are all the time controlling it through police force, through courts, through punishments, through fear. And crime has not ended. Violence has not ended. Because without the inner transformation, it won't end. And that inner transformation requires this kind of education, which brings sensitivity and compassion and love. But we are not interested in that. We are interested in earning money, acquiring status, so-called success, and so on. And that's what we have set up our education to achieve that. That involves competition, rivalry, and all that. And that is an ego process that creates division, aggression, and all that. So we object to it when it grows very big and turns into war, but we are all contributing to it. And similarly, in the individual life, we try to control our anger, control our violence, control our jealousy, control our boredom or escape from it. We are not solving it. Because to solve it, you need to learn, you need to understand what is right relationship. You have to come upon the art of living. So the two things are different. How to cope with society and the conditions in society and adjust to them is one kind of education, that is conformity, and it maintains society the way it is. And the other is to question society, to doubt it, to free oneself of the false and not contribute to the disorder in society, which means not also in one's own relationships or inside our consciousness. It's a different level of responsibility. It's not enough to say that I tell the truth, I am respectable and so on. It's not a question of respectability. That's a religious question. If you really are interested, then what is a deeply religious life? A deeply religious life requires that you come upon peace and harmony and cooperation and love and compassion. And you can't come upon that through any kind of methods, organization, so-called Hatha Yoga and so on. The real meaning of yoga was not just Hatha Yoga. It's a very superficial meaning that we have given to yoga. Yoga was really being united with the higher. And that means all this. That includes self-knowledge, that includes all that pranayama and inquiry and everything, self-knowledge. But you have reduced it to just exercises for keeping the body healthy. It's all right, there's nothing wrong with it, but it is very limited. If you read Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, you find that there is many more dimensions to it. It is just the beginning is Hatha Yoga. But it goes all the way. If you take the easy, do the easy, and we are satisfied with it, then your inquiry ends. So it's important to come upon this learning mind. And Krishnaji said the learning mind is the religious mind. And it's a way of life. I mean, you keep learning. You live with that mind right through life till death. Even on his deathbed, I found that he was still learning. He told the doctor, don't give me morphine because I have lived with death every day, but I have never experienced physical death. And so I want to meet it with a clear mind, and therefore don't give me, I'm willing to go through the pain, but I don't want you to give me morphine and so on, it dulls the mind. The man had such a passion for learning that he was still learning while he was dying. So I have ended. If you have questions.
Sir, we just have 5 minutes left. Would you rather take a question or end it here?
Oh, I see. I am open to take questions. Yeah.
We'll do one question, sir.
All right. All
Go
right.
ahead.
Sir, when you are investigating, inquiring, finding causation in the learning mind, then how come the learning mind is not of time?
Baldev,
I'm stuck in this.
perception is instantaneous. But of course, it occurs in time. No? Krishnaji had the mystic experience of 1922 in that month of August 1922 under the pepper tree. It didn't take time. It just happened at that moment. So perception is like that. Einstein came upon the truth that space and time are connected to each other and we live in a space-time continuum in a flash. That flash took several years to come. He lived with a question for a long time. So you have to understand the role of time. But the change or the discovery comes in a flash. And it doesn't come gradually.
Right.
That's what it means, yeah. It's not a time process.
So the learning mind, as we call it, it means it's just the perception part, but the inquiry and all that is in the time frame, right?
No, that is all that time is passing because you're not having perception.
Right.
Yes.
Well, I understand that. Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
So my question was only this thing that the learning mind,
Yeah.
when we use this term, we are only talking of the perception.
Yes, perception is action in this field.
Right.
Yeah, not in the social field, that's different. But
Right.
in the religious field, perception is true action because only that brings about transformation of consciousness.
Right. And that is learning mind.
That's the learning mind is a mind that lives with questions and is inquiring and seeking to discern what is true and what is false. When it perceives something that is false as false, the false ends, that is perception. But you can kill it. If you have a very knowledgeable mind attached to the known, then it will not perceive.
Right.
So knowledge actually makes you insensitive. You think you know, and that's the danger. You know, Achyut Patwardhan was a very, for several years, very committed worker with working for Krishnamurti in Rajghat. And I interviewed him. And one of the profoundest things that he said, and it's there in the chapter where I have published that in my book, the interview. He said, Krishna, I have been a good public speaker, but nobody knows how many tears I have shed, wishing I did not have this facility with words, because words have a way of making you feel that you have understood when you have not understood. I mean, this was such an admission of the block of the intellectual, that you are satisfied with explanations and words. Yeah. There is a dialogue also between Krishnamurti and David Bohm where this comes up. David Bohm keeps on saying, how do you say that? How would you explain it? So 2-3 times he says that. So then Krishnamurti says, are you only interested in explanations? Right? So explanations are there, but they are superficial things.
Yes.
Perception, explanation is not perception.
Right. Right. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Perhaps we should end at this point, sir.
Okay. So see you next Friday.
Yes, sir.
Thank you all.
You're welcome.
Namaste, sir.
And
Thank you
next
very much.
Friday, that means chapter 12, 13, and 14. We are coming towards the end of the book. It has 16 chapters. So read those chapters.
Thank you very
12,
much.
13, and 14. Most welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Krishna.
Thank you, Salvador.
Thank you, Krishna.
Well, thank you for putting up with me.
Very much. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rohan.
Thank you, sir.